I've worked in this park for well over 25 years now and have experienced things that most people don't even believe exist or think are extinct. I was going on one of my daily rounds when I saw something fly from the trees down below into another set of trees ahead. The bird didn't seem normal at all. It had an enormous wingspan and made a high-pitched screeching sound. My first thought was, there is no way this is real. At this point, I thought it might be some new species, but what else could it be? After seeing this thing again about 5 minutes later while driving towards Grant Village, you couldn't miss it as it swooped across the road in front of me to disappear into more tree cover right off the road near Shoshone Lake. Well, fast forward 2 weeks, and word has gotten around among some of us rangers about someone sighting giant bat-like creatures with red eyes. So there's talk among us that maybe they aren't birds, but actual living beings. At work, everyone refers to these supposed birds as demons, not because they're evil, but because their looks remind them too much of demons, according to Dante Alighieri. Now fast forward 6 months, we received a report of a possible murder near our station around the West Thumb Geyser Basin. It turns out those red-eyed bats and demons were found eating part of a grizzly bear's carcass. I'm not gonna lie, I pissed myself before firing off 4 rounds at them, only for them to disperse for brief moments before flying away in different directions once more. During that whole time period, wildlife inside and outside the forest went quiet and eerily silent. That night, however, the animals, including grizzlies, began getting louder. The grizzlies roared loudly every half hour, seemingly still scared. On edge till daybreak, I did hear those red-eyed things in the trees again with a low grunting and an occasional squeak as they devoured the remaining bear meat off their chosen tree or whatever. Thankfully, they disappeared at some point because I stopped hearing them, maybe when dawn broke. I can tell you this, the fear that these bat-like creatures brought me that night still haunts my mind to this day. However, upon reflection, we realized that they did not pursue us. Their sole intention was to devour the remaining bears, which had been attacked by an unidentified creature, distinct from wolves. So no, it wasn't anything close to a werewolf. Don't get me wrong though, we, or anyone else, never saw this thing. This unknown thing clearly took down several grizzlies since none of them left bite marks in each other's wounds. Although I suspect someone may have fired a round for caution or fun, no bullet holes were found. Due to the vastness of Yellowstone, any reports we hear from the northern region near West Thumb would likely be dismissed. I've had other colleagues who've spotted this thing. Most are too afraid to even mention what they've seen, let alone report it. One of the stories goes like this. Apparently, a tourist group went missing one time while hiking around Geyser Hill. Some think it was those bat demons, as people call them, that took them off somewhere. Others say maybe wolves got them. But I can tell you, nobody knows for sure. Anyhow, their campfire kept burning when rangers found their gear, but no sign of tourists disappeared altogether. A few days later, the Forest Lake fire threatened to rapidly spread down into the West Thumb Basin. Authorities deemed the area unsafe and pulled several other workers, including me, from our posts, instructing us to evacuate immediately. Later, I found out that our own boss saw these bat demons flying overhead before getting away themselves. However, no one has mentioned that day since then, as the news never broke. Another ranger, whose name I will not disclose for privacy reasons, witnessed this thing feeding on the corpse of a hiker. She saw it with her own eyes. Someone partially ate the body, and signs of struggle were nearby. We found bloodstains on the ground and tree branches broken off from a fight. The authorities tried to cover up these incidents because they didn't want to cause panic among tourists or have people stop visiting Yellowstone. I personally believe that this creature is responsible for many of the missing persons cases in Yellowstone and possibly other national parks as well. These cases are eerie in their similarities. Bodies found without any obvious cause of death, no signs of animal predation, and strange circumstances surrounding their disappearance. What scares me even more is that we don't know what this thing really is or where it came from. All I know is that it's real, it's dangerous, and we need to be vigilant when patrolling the park. Higher-ups who refuse to acknowledge their existence, dismiss our sightings as hallucinations or misidentifications. An unknown monster lurks in our national parks, and there is little information about its behavior or the best way to deal with it. All I can say is that if you ever find yourself in one of these areas, stay alert and be cautious, especially at night. Keep your distance from wildlife and report anything unusual you see. It could save your life. Have there been sightings? Yes. Do I think all 411 missing are results of cryptids? No. Sometimes those people disappear into thin air. How long did most encounters last? It is hard to tell because some experiences seem longer than others. Is Bigfoot Sasquatch involved? This guy eats deer like nothing. Where do most occurrences happen within national parks? Usually in dense forests, it is away from populated areas. However, big cities aren't immune to it either. Is there any other correlation that we know of between people who went missing? The missing person tends to be an average male in his late teens or early 20s, but others are just kids. What happens after you come back? Do they treat you like crazy? Do they keep it quiet for your safety? Usually both. It really depends on who reports and what position or authority rank said individual has. Can I ask why this happened, and were these things dangerous? Why would a demon kill for meat rather than a man eating cryptid, a wendigo, werewolf, or Sasquatch? No one knows if they are demons for certain, as we don't have evidence to support such claims other than how the beast looks. Hence why many park rangers refer to them as demons per Dante Alighieri's works, although I've heard various names, including bat monsters or devils, given their red eyes resembling classic Western depictions of devils. Were the park rangers told about this encounter by their superiors? Some of my colleagues remain uninformed and dismiss the bat demon stories as baseless hearsay. That's not uncommon though, even within small groups. Amazingly few reports about my encounters have reached authorities since folks here dismiss sightings. Even if someone sees something unusual, chances are high that no one will take notice until multiple people report the same thing independently, like what occurred in August or September. Are there any actual Bigfoot sightings there, according to the locals? Yes, indeed. There have been plenty of stories reported through the decades, usually involving tourists going camping near remote lakes inside forested areas. However, locals also tend to see them now and then when hunting at dusk or dawn. How often do these disappearances occur outside of Yellowstone National Park? Since news hardly ever makes national headlines, let alone statewide, most people probably aren't aware of missing persons happenings, thus making them more frequent events elsewhere due to decreased surveillance compared to national parks and forests in general. Were any hikers actually found dead, or were they just considered missing? Good question. In some cases, hikers' bodies were discovered after a significant amount of time, but not in the immediate area where they disappeared, while in other instances, people simply vanished without a trace. What do I think it is? I honestly don't know. It could be anything really. Interdimensional, unknown, cryptid, or something we have yet to even classify. Like Mothman at Point Pleasant back then, my colleagues and I have discussed this theory before. Occult rituals can potentially summon or invite these creatures into our world, especially if they are not native to our realm. Many Native American tribes still practice spiritual rituals and traditions with a long history. However, it's important to note that this is just speculation at this point. We don't have enough evidence to definitively say what these creatures are or where they come from. All we know is that they exist and they pose a threat to both wildlife and humans. Tracing the origin or identifying the exact individuals who brought these creatures into our realm, if they were indeed summoned through an occult ritual, would be extremely difficult. It's also possible that these creatures have been around for much longer than we realize, lurking in the shadows until now. In any case, I believe it's crucial for us as park rangers and caretakers of national parks to remain vigilant and continue reporting sightings or encounters with these bat-like creatures so that we can gather more information about their behavior and patterns and potentially find ways to mitigate the dangers they pose. I hope my response was helpful. If you have any further questions or thoughts on this topic, please let me know. I'm always interested in discussing these mysteries with fellow enthusiasts. I wanted to let you know about a bizarre event that occurred this past weekend while camping in the Yellowstone backcountry. This is an unclassified occurrence, and I believe it was our bad luck at being in the wrong place at the wrong time. It was on Saturday morning, around 6:30 a.m., A bear expert advised me not to file this with any park personnel, so I do not want anyone to think we are making up such events. But due to my own concern over the safety of others and their enjoyment of Yellowstone NP, I felt I needed advice from someone in authority, as all hikers should be aware. I heard what sounded like rustling grass down from where our campsite was located along Soda Butte Creek, near Slough Creek Campground. At first light, myself and two other people began preparing breakfast when one friend came running towards us, warning of grisly activity rapidly approaching upriver about 50 yards below us. The grizzly charged straight into an adjacent fishing area occupied by a fly fisherman who yelled loudly and tried his best to hit it with his rod. Upon impact, the grizzly dropped onto all fours, sniffed the air, intensely shook its head, and walked quickly toward him. A crowd started forming and shouting at it, waving their arms. However, most people were probably more concerned with taking photographs than trying to prevent some mishap. Moments later, one young boy tried approaching closer, stumbling only 15 feet across rough terrain, slipping, falling forward, tumbling several times, desperately scrambling, backing away again, and shouting repeatedly. At that moment, we heard 3 rifle shots echoing nearby. Suddenly, 4 wranglers emerged from behind, shooting high above and aiming beyond the tall evergreens. They seemed startled. So, having left the Angus Cabin Leasing stable facility already, we encountered groups heading westward and northwest over the parkway carrying heavy antlers. A herd separated each moose, seemingly reluctant for whatever reason, heading northeast uphill, quietly rejoining. Thinking maybe feeding hot spring pools scattered close by, perhaps warming them. No snow or ice on the ground, so probably thermal energy reserves weakened from winter while seemingly close-knit, remaining friendly. The immediate danger was apparently over once rangers drove down the road, pushing their motorcycles parking by the riverside closer to Slough Creek Ranger Station. But, in fact, they could not locate or scare it away permanently just yet. Therefore, be aware that such an encounter was temporary at best, unfortunately. Our gear had been ripped apart left of the kitchen area several feet below, a bag being taken out about 20 to 25 yards further, where heavy underbrush provided ample cover for something rummaging through food packets, unzipping 2 tents there and ripping another badly. It also appeared strange, which might have deterred animal consumption, leaving it unfinished, nevertheless interesting. Sorry, this is a long-winded email and has run off track somewhat. Feel free to edit, please. Should you use parts if needed? Fearful for other tourists staying overnight camping alone during spring bear encounters, given the info above, because precautions can always help prevent possible injuries. I personally believe everyone should avoid remote areas when grizzly bears are near, like right now, especially early mornings, as they do attack, often charging without provocation. Since none of us know why most experts disagree concerning park regulations forcing proper disposal, non-resident visitors should hang coolers high up into trees, hopefully attracting attention from others and cautioning carelessness. Also about keeping clear bags empty on the front porch nearest the site. I certainly hope that officials instruct campsites to dispose of hot coals in public bins. Officials should clean these bins each morning to prevent garbage accumulation after breakfast. Officials should collect the coals from noon through the evening and burn them towards dusk. It is important for officials to notice the presence of charcoal and replace the ashes, as this will help prevent similar attacks in the future. However, a major concern is that we now acknowledge the need to take immediate steps whenever there is a risk of being attacked, ensuring that visitors can help everyone by always reporting bear activity sightings, including footprints. Hearing smells, blood, rotting meat, and general waste are obvious common sense. It's worth stating their importance for public awareness. Sorry for having interrupted my message and briefly returned it, mentioning quite a lot already. If necessary, report it. Otherwise, sorry this email ran so long while providing specific information regarding what I felt others should be aware of until authorities act with due caution. No one has ever explained the Yellowstone Park mystery. I think I know what it is, but who knows for sure? It all started back in 2001 when we were hiking up Specimen Ridge, which is located on the northeast side of the park near Soda Butte. We had decided to go off trail and follow a stream up through a canyon because there was no other way around this cliff face without backtracking several miles. I have been an avid hiker and backpacker since high school. I've always enjoyed going off trail and seeing things that few people ever get to see, especially in national parks. Anyway, as we followed the stream up through this beautiful, narrow canyon with steep cliffs on either side, my girlfriend suddenly froze and grabbed me by the arm. My eyes went straight to where she was pointing above us. Perched on top of a dead tree stump, jutting out from the sheer rock wall was this gigantic bat-looking thing. It must have had a wingspan of about 8 feet or more. It could have easily picked one of us up if it wanted to, though whether or not its claws could grip onto anything smooth enough for takeoff seemed doubtful. At first glance, we both thought it was some kind of large bird because its body did resemble that somewhat. Although instead of feathers covering its skin like birds usually do, this creature's skin appeared scaly, almost leathery looking instead. But then came another shock. When we saw its head better, neither one could believe what our eyes were telling us. Its face looked very similar to that of Satan. Seriously, this beast actually looked demonic. The forehead bulged slightly outward, with 2 small horns protruding upwards and backwards. The eyes were huge, with a menacing, evil look to them, and the nose had sort of a snout-like appearance, except this snout also seemed pointed at the end, sort of like a vampire bat's muzzle looks in cartoons or movies. However, it was very real. And what really gave us chills down our spines was when we saw its mouth open for just an instant, revealing rows upon rows of sharp teeth inside those blood-red lips. At first, we thought maybe it was an endangered species because nobody ever mentioned seeing anything like this before while hiking in Yellowstone. But then, after talking about it later on with some friends who worked there, one guy told me that he knew exactly what I had seen, but that no official explanation would be given by the park's service because they didn't want to create any kind of panic among tourists. I won't say how he knew what these creatures were, only that he confirmed their existence years ago during some research projects being conducted deep within Yellowstone. It seems several sightings occurred over time throughout different areas within the park too, which meant there must have been quite a few individuals living here, although where they stayed hidden most of the time remained unknown as well. Now keep in mind that these demonic-looking bats could easily pass themselves off as large birds if seen from far enough away, especially if all you're seeing is their wingspan against the bright blue sky overhead rather than their bodies up close. We wondered if others might have dismissed them simply as huge birds, since we never heard any stories about encounters involving similar winged beasts coming out of Yellowstone prior to our own experience. Fast forward 4 years, my new girlfriend and I decided to hike through another part of Specimen Ridge, this time heading northeast towards Lamar Valley. Everything went smoothly until near sunset, when something flew over us, making loud flapping noises with its wings. At first, I thought it might be an eagle, but then I remembered what my old girlfriend and I had seen before, so we quickly got our binoculars out for a closer look. To our surprise, they reappeared, this time positioned atop towering lodgepole pines, gazing down upon the valley below. Once more, their enormous wingspans stood out clearly against the twilight sky. However, this time they didn't appear as demonic-looking to us because of the dim lighting conditions and greater distance between us. Nevertheless, it was obvious these creatures were definitely not birds either. We decided to leave right away, rather than wait around till morning, since we couldn't see any logical reason why huge bats would be flying over Yellowstone National Park during daylight hours, unless maybe something happened to disturb them. Anyway, that's my story. Take it or leave it. Though personally, I think you'll find others who've witnessed similar things too if you ask around long enough. This event happened to me about 15 years ago. I lived in Montana and was attending college at the time. During spring break, a few of my friends and I decided to go backpacking in Yellowstone National Park for several days. In the late afternoon of the first day, we reached our destination and began hiking into Slough Creek Trail, situated north of Tower Junction. I will mention that I've always been fascinated with the possibility of encountering Bigfoot or some other unknown creature while out camping. But this experience was something entirely different. Our plan was to hike deep into the backcountry, where we would set up camp near a lake and then do some fishing before nightfall. There were 4 of us, Dave, Keith, and Sean, who were brothers. It took us over 2 hours to reach our campsite after starting from the trailhead. The area is very rugged but beautiful, with high peaks surrounded by thick pine forests. As soon as we reached our spot, it started raining heavily, so we quickly pitched our tents under cover among a stand of tall trees. We made dinner inside one tent because it continued raining through most of the evening. The rain finally stopped around midnight, so Dave suggested that he take a first look outside for bears or any other wildlife activity. It wasn't long until all 3 of us fell asleep. The next thing I remember is waking up early in the morning when daylight had just broken out across the sky. Suddenly, Dave came bursting through his tent, screaming like mad. He said something attacked him during his watch and told us what happened. According to Dave's account, he heard something walking towards him from behind just as he noticed movement off to his left side. He said he only turned on his flashlight a few moments before seeing this large, bat-like creature flying right at him. Dave stated that it looked exactly like an oversized vampire bat with dark brownish-black fur covering its body. It grabbed onto his arm while knocking him down backwards, where he fell to the ground. Dave said that he managed to kick it off and then got up to run towards our tents. He claimed that the creature pursued him, attempting to grab his leg as he made it through the tree line and into camp. That's when all of us woke up after hearing Dave screaming outside. I asked him if this was some kind of joke, but Keith and Sean seemed just as terrified as Dave did at that moment. Dave showed me a small puncture wound on his arm, which appeared fresh, but there wasn't much blood around it. Investigating where we were standing, I noticed large footprints in the mud near one tent. They measured about 15 inches long by 8 inches wide, with claw marks at the front. It looked like something out of Jurassic Park. We decided not to stay any longer because no one wanted another encounter with whatever attacked us. The entire hike back was quiet until we reached our vehicle. None of us could comprehend what had occurred or what kind of creature had attacked Dave. As for now, I haven't been back in Yellowstone since then, nor have I told anyone else about my experience. Could this have been an actual unknown species? If so, has anyone ever encountered such a thing before? If I could accurately describe this thing that attacked us, I would say it was a large bat-like creature, but not an actual bat. The best way to describe it is as follows. Its body size was similar to that of a very large owl, with a wingspan reaching at least 6 feet across. It had dark brownish-black fur covering its entire body except for the wings, which were more leathery-looking. The head was monstrous and appeared demonic in nature. 2 red eyes positioned forward, along with 2 small ears sticking up on top, and a pointy snout filled with razor-sharp teeth that could easily tear flesh apart. The arms looked like those of an oversized vampire bat, but much thicker, ending in long claws resembling fingers. Its legs were thick and muscular, like those of a bear or gorilla, again ending in long clawed feet. I didn't notice any tails, nor do I recall smelling anything strange about this creature during our encounter. Researchers have not reported any animal or bird species within Yellowstone National Park that remotely resemble this entity. Maybe something similar exists deep within the South American rainforests, but who can say for sure? If you can shed some light on what we encountered, please let me know. Thank you. I went to Yellowstone National Park with my girlfriend at the time. We hiked around, saw Old Faithful, and decided to hike a trail that led us down to some hot springs. We became lost on the way back up as darkness fell and we lacked flashlights. I had enough sense to tell her we needed to make camp for the night instead of continuing through dense woods in pitch blackness. We set up our tent next to this creek or stream about 10 feet away from us in what seemed like an old campground because there were remnants of old fire pits all over, with some rocks still perfectly placed where they would have been years ago. It started raining so hard later that night that it made me nervous thinking about flash flooding since we were pretty close to the river coming off of one of those mountains. Well, she passed out early from being exhausted, but I stayed awake, staring outside, listening for any sound or noise coming from anything that could potentially be dangerous. This is when things started getting weird. The rain eventually stopped falling after a couple hours, and I began hearing strange mechanical noises above my head, along with tree branches snapping and leaves rustling. The best way I can describe these mechanical sounds is by telling you if you've ever played Fallout before on Xbox, PS3, etc., then it's kind of like when you come across those Protectron robots just going haywire, repeating help every second over and over again until they see you. I sat there, shivering inside my sleeping bag, thinking something must be near because why else would this robot-sounding thing keep making noises? After sitting in silence, waiting for what felt like an eternity, this humanoid-shaped electrical outline appeared through our tent, which caused it to lighten like pulses inside our tent. It stood completely still, looking right at me, even though it didn't have eyes or facial features, as far as I could tell. It was probably about 7-8 feet tall, but the head part of it seemed like a crown, with multiple points jutting out all over from the top, going down to where it would have its shoulders, while everything else below this crown looked like tentacles swaying back and forth, just like how tree branches sway when the wind blows them. The moment I laid eyes on this thing, my heart started racing faster than it ever has before. Not because I was scared, but because at that exact same moment, my girlfriend woke up screaming at me, telling me we needed to leave immediately, which caused me to feel dizzy as hell. We packed up our gear without hesitation and took off, running through the woods until daylight hit us. I told her what happened once we were far away from there, and she thought maybe it was an owl or something that got too close. So I made sure she understood how absolutely huge whatever this thing was, even though there's no way in hell an owl could get that big. She eventually gave in believing me enough, saying maybe some kind of crazy bird does exist out here, then changed the subject by asking if I felt okay still after leaving abruptly earlier, which reminded me that right when she woke up screaming, that was exactly when those strange mechanical noises stopped. We walked for hours later on, talking about anything besides last night, since neither one of us wanted to think about what might be following us now. We both agreed that not mentioning any more details other than something that did indeed happen would be best anyway. But during these long hours of hiking, feeling exhausted and nauseous whenever I looked behind myself, expecting nothing, that's when strange occurrences began to happen once more. The first time, leaves fell slowly onto the ground instead of floating straight down from the sky directly above them. They floated perfectly horizontally towards the left, along the ground, until they disappeared behind trees. The next time, I heard those mechanical noises again, but this time they were coming from a different direction than before. Finally, when I turned around to look, expecting to see another outline of a humanoid figure, I was surprised to see 3 white beams of light in the sky above us. The beams formed a triangle shape and remained stationary for several seconds before disappearing completely. I told her we needed to hurry up so she could keep moving faster, but she wouldn't listen, telling me nothing happened whenever she turned around. It wasn't until later that day, after more hours passed by without any incidents whatsoever, did I start feeling normal again, only because this crazy stuff stopped happening and never returned throughout our entire trip, at least not while hiking anyway. That night, though, as we sat near the fire eating dinner, both of us heard footsteps walking towards our campsite, but no matter how many times either one of us got up looking outside, nothing was ever there, except those weird mechanical sounds once or twice, even if they were faint now. We stayed awake talking about whatever came to mind, making sure neither one fell asleep, since that's probably what saved our lives. I can't imagine waking up with something touching you, knowing it didn't exist yesterday evening, let alone before tonight. Either way, these memories haunt me still today, along with strange radiation burns all over my legs where skin peeled off days later. Anyway, thanks for letting me share this experience.